Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't learn my greatest lessons when the bank account was full or when the fridge was overflowing. I learned my life lesson when my pocket was empty. Oh, I'm talking to someone who's been there. Not just broke, I mean broken, empty, praying over gas tanks, stretching instant noodles, smiling while suffering. You ever been there? See, when your pocket is empty, your perspective shifts. You stop buying things to impress people who don't even know your name. You start valuing peace over possessions. You stop chasing status and start chasing substance. Empty pockets are loud instructors. They teach you how to stretch, how to survive, how to strategize. They introduce you to the difference between needs and wants. They remind you to be resourceful with what you have, not resentful over what you don't. But here's the beauty: empty doesn't mean finished. Just because the pocket is empty doesn't mean your life is. You might be low on funds, but you're not low on favor. You may lack money, but you've got mind, muscle, and mission. Don't despise the season of empty. It was in the famine that Joseph learned to manage the feast. It was in the desert that Moses found his calling. It was in the belly of the fish that Jonah found his direction, and it might just be in the bottom of your pocket that you find your power. You don't need a bank loan to be brilliant. You don't need a paycheck to walk in purpose. You don't need applause to do what you were born to do. If your pocket is empty today, hold your head high. You're in the classroom of life. You're being prepared, not punished. You're being equipped, not excluded, because when you come out of this, you'll know how to walk with humility, manage with wisdom, and bless others with compassion. You won't just have money, you'll have meaning. You won't just have things, you'll have testimony. So I say, thank God for the empty pocket. It taught me how to live full. It taught me how to believe bigger. It taught me to never measure wealth by what's in my wallet, but by what's in my heart. Clap your hands if you've ever been broke, but came out blessed, because that empty pocket, it gave me a full life lesson. Lack has a way of showing up uninvited. It creeps into your life like a shadow at dusk, silent, persistent, and often unexpected. Whether it's financial struggle, emotional emptiness, spiritual drought, or physical need, lack arrives like a visitor you never asked for but somehow must host. And yet, as painful and uncomfortable as it may be, lack comes not to punish but to instruct. You see, there are some lessons in life that abundance simply cannot teach. When everything is flowing, when your needs are met without effort, when the doors swing open at the sound of your name, you can become numb to the depth of what it means to truly value something. But when lack steps in, when the purse is light, the table is bare, the options are few, it sharpens your senses. It awakens something in you that ease never could. Lack is not a curse. It is a sacred tutor. It speaks in silence. It teaches in scarcity. It disciplines you with the kind of tough love that makes you wiser, stronger, and more resilient than you ever imagined. And the first thing lack does is strip you of the illusion of control. When you have nothing left to lean on, no one left to call, no plan B, no cushion to fall back on, you discover who you really are. It's easy to look polished when your pockets are full and your bills are paid. It's easy to smile when everything's working. But what do you do when it all dries up? What happens when the well runs out, the income slows down, and people stop answering your calls? That's when the real education begins. Lack forces you to confront yourself. It reveals the hidden weaknesses you covered with comfort. It shows you the cracks in your character, the flaws in your faith, the gaps in your gratitude. And yet, at the same time, lack introduces you to your hidden strength. It uncovers resilience you didn't know you had. It forces you to stretch. It pushes you to think creatively, to problem solve, to hustle with purpose, to pray with sincerity. It's in the silence of lack that your greatest ideas are born. It's when the room is empty that you begin to hear what really matters. Lack teaches discipline. When you only have a little, you learn how to manage it. You begin to appreciate every dollar, every meal, every drop of oil in the jar. You stop wasting, you stop consuming mindlessly, you become intentional, every choice counts, every yes is measured, every no is necessary, and what once seemed small begins to look like a blessing, because you know what it feels like to have nothing. Lack humbles you. It reminds you that you are not invincible. It takes the ego off the throne. It resets your priorities. It makes you reach out to people you once overlooked. It makes you grateful for the kind of help you used to think you'd never need. And when people extend a hand of compassion to you, you start to understand the sacredness of kindness. You realize that a word of encouragement, a shared meal, or a simple act of generosity carries more weight than you ever realized. But even deeper than the discipline and the humility, lack gives you perspective. It shifts your focus. Suddenly the things you used to chase don't seem so urgent. The car, the clothes, the status, they all lose their grip on your heart. Because when you're in lack, you're stripped down to the core. You start to ask what really matters. What do I truly need to live, to thrive, to feel whole? And from that question comes clarity. You begin to see what matters most. Peace over possessions, love over labels, purpose over popularity. You come out of lack with eyes that see differently. You don't just admire wealth, you understand work. You don't just seek comfort, you seek calling. You don't just want more, you want meaning. Lack prepares you for abundance. It trains your hands to handle blessings with care. When you finally receive more, you don't waste it, because you remember the days of not enough. You steward better. You share more. You live more gratefully. People who have never lacked may be rich in resources but poor in wisdom. But those who have walked through the valley of not enough, who have prayed with empty hands and believed in dry seasons, come out with a wealth that money can't buy. And here's the paradox. Sometimes it's the lack that brings you closer to the source of all provision. Sometimes when the fridge is empty and the bills are due, you discover that your hope was never supposed to be in the material anyway. Sometimes it takes a famine to teach you where your true nourishment comes from. It's not just about bread, it's about truth, about trust, about learning to lean on a power greater than yourself. You may look around and see nothing, but that's when faith is forged. It's in the fire of lack that belief is tested and strengthened. You learn how to praise when you're down. You learn how to give when you barely have. You learn how to keep showing up when every part of you wants to quit. That is the kind of faith that moves mountains, and one day you'll look back and realize that the lack didn't destroy you. It made you. It wasn't the enemy you thought it was. It was a season, a storm, a teacher, and you graduated from it with more than money. You came out with depth, with compassion, with wisdom, with gratitude. And now, when others find themselves in that place, you won't just offer advice, you'll offer understanding. You'll speak from a place of having lived it. Lack is not forever. It may visit, but it doesn't stay. Seasons change, tables turn, doors open, but what remains with you is the lesson, the character, the awareness, the strength. That's what you carry into your next season. That's what makes you unstoppable. Not the weight in your wallet, but the fire in your soul. So if you're walking through a season of lack right now, take heart. Don't despise it. Don't curse it. Listen to what it's teaching. Grow through what you're going through. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not being diminished. You are being developed. Your pocket may be empty, but your life is not. You're being refined. You're being made ready. There's a greater version of you on the other side of this, and when you come out, because you'll come out, you'll carry something far more valuable than money. You'll carry the wisdom that only lack can teach. There are moments in life when everything around you begins to dry up. The doors that used to open suddenly stay shut. The people who used to call go silent. The support you once counted on vanishes. Your strength begins to wane, and your hope flickers like the last candle in a dark room. You pray, but the heavens seem quiet. You reach, but nothing moves. It feels like you're walking through a drought, a famine not just of food or finance, but of clarity, connection, and certainty. And it is in this very place that something sacred begins to stir. It is in the famine that your faith is not only tested but refined. It is in the fire of lack, in the hunger for answers, in the thirst for relief, that faith begins to take on its real shape. Faith that is never challenged remains soft, unformed, and shallow. But when life places you in the heat of hardship, when your prayers go unanswered for a while, when your expectations are unmet, and yet you still dare to believe, that is when true faith is born. The fire of famine does not come to destroy you. It comes to remove the unnecessary. It comes to burn away the excess so that what remains is real and unshakable. It is easy to say you believe when everything is going well. It is easy to quote scripture when the rent is paid, the children are safe, the job is secure. But what happens when all of that begins to shake? What happens when the check is delayed, the phone doesn't ring, the door doesn't open, the doctor's report isn't what you hoped? That's when the fire starts to blaze, that's when the famine settles in, and that's when faith begins to be forged. Faith forged in famine is not decorative, it is not cute, it is not shallow or polished. It is gritty, it is raw, it is real. It is the kind of faith that says even if I don't see it, I will still trust. Even if the fig tree does not blossom, even if the vine yields no fruit, even if there is no cattle in the stall, I will still lift my hands and say thank you. That kind of faith can only come through fire. There is something purifying about pain. When you are in lack, you start to discern what matters and what doesn't. You begin to see how much of your faith was based on comfort instead of conviction. The famine forces you to strip away every illusion and lean into what is eternal. You stop relying on what you have and begin trusting who you know. You learn how to walk not by sight, but by trust, and not just trust in a system or a person, but trust in a promise that hasn't yet come to pass. In the fire of famine, you may feel abandoned, but you are not alone. Silence is not absence. Delay is not denial. The fire is not the end. It is the process. You are being shaped. You are being strengthened. Every unanswered question is adding depth. Every day you choose to believe is adding weight to your witness. Every step you take through the valley is building a kind of resilience that cannot be taught in comfort. Some of the greatest characters in history were formed in the furnace of lack. They did not rise in palaces, they were refined in pits. They were shaped in deserts, in wildernesses, in lonely places where only God could hear them cry. And yet they emerged with a strength that the world could not shake. Their faith was not academic, it was not theoretical. It was forged through tears, through waiting, through pressing forward when every part of them wanted to give up. Famine has a way of revealing what's fake and exposing what's real. It removes the option of pretending. In abundance, you can mask insecurity with luxury. You can cover fear with distractions, but in famine the masks come off. In famine you are stripped bare, and that's where your most honest faith begins to emerge. That is where you begin to pray not from a place of tradition, but from a place of hunger. That is where you don't just repeat words, but you release groanings too deep for speech. That is where you begin to know not just the idea of God, but the very presence of God. Faith forged in famine doesn't need a crowd to clap, it doesn't need circumstances to agree, it doesn't need everything to be perfect. That faith knows how to stand in the storm. That faith knows how to believe when nothing looks right. That faith doesn't shout because of what is seen, but because of what is promised. And that kind of faith is dangerous to the enemy. Because once you've believed God in the fire, you can't be manipulated by favor. Once you've seen him be enough when you had nothing, you'll never idolize what you have again. Famine strips away idols. It reveals the things you've leaned on that could never really carry you. It shows you what was temporary. It uncovers the crutches, and once you've walked through a famine leaning only on faith, you start to walk differently. You stop needing the applause of others. You stop fearing rejection. You stop panicking at every closed door, because you've been through worse, and God was still there. Some of the sweetest worship is birthed in famine. Some of the most powerful prayers come from empty places. Some of the most profound breakthroughs happen when you have no strength left but still whisper yes. And even though famine feels like a curse, it often turns out to be a holy furnace burning away fear, burning away pride, burning away dependence on things that cannot sustain you. You may not feel it in the moment, but the fire is forging something eternal. That quiet, stubborn, unrelenting belief that refuses to give up is being strengthened every day you wake up and keep moving. Every time you hold on when it would be easier to let go, you are being made into something stronger, something wiser, something more useful than ever before. So don't despise the famine. Don't run from the fire. Stand in it. Learn from it. Let it shape you. Let it stretch you. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. You are not being broken. You are being built. Something in you is coming alive, something unshakable, something divine. And when you come out of this season, your faith will not be fragile, it will be fire, tested. There is purpose in the pain, there is power in the pressing, there is victory even in the valley, and though the famine may feel like the end, it is only the beginning of a deeper journey. The fire is temporary, but the faith it produces will last forever. And when you come out, people will look at you and wonder how you made it. But you'll know it was forged in the fire of famine. You'll know you came through because you chose to believe when nothing made sense. You'll know that what you carry now was not handed to you, it was formed in you. And that kind of faith, it cannot be shaken, it cannot be bought, it cannot be stolen, it is yours, because it was born in famine. And it was forged by fire. There comes a time in every life when pressure begins to rise. It doesn't knock. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply arrives. It presses on your chest when you wake up in the morning. It whispers in your thoughts when you try to sleep at night. Pressure builds in the silence, in the stress, in the moments when it seems everything you are holding is heavier than what your hands were made for. And yet, somehow, in the very midst of that pressure, something deeper begins to stir. People are often searching for purpose. They ask questions that echo through their hearts. Why am I here? What am I made for? What is the meaning behind all of this? But the truth is that purpose rarely shows up in peace. It usually reveals itself under strain. It doesn't come while you're lounging in comfort or sitting in the seat of ease. Purpose often waits until the pressure is so intense that you have no choice but to break or break through. When life closes in, when the bills stack up, when relationships stretch and jobs demand more than they give, when your own thoughts turn into battlegrounds and the clock seems to work against you, that's when something within begins to awaken. Pressure has a strange way of peeling back the surface and exposing what lies beneath. It does not create your purpose, but it uncovers it. The journey to purpose is not a straight path paved with convenience. It is often a winding road, filled with moments that feel too heavy to carry. But that weight, that pressure, that inner resistance you feel when you're on the verge of collapse, it is not working against you. It is shaping you. It is carving character into your soul. It is pressing the softness out of your excuses and squeezing determination into your veins. And even though you feel like you're suffocating, something deeper is being formed. When you look at how diamonds are made, you realize they don't come from pleasant conditions. They are formed deep beneath the surface of the earth, where heat and pressure are at their highest. It is not a gentle process. It is not a beautiful one. But out of that pain, out of that intensity, something rare and unbreakable emerges. In the same way, your purpose is being shaped beneath the surface, in the moments no one sees, in the tears you cry in silence, in the pressure that pushes you to your edge. Sometimes it takes a crisis to wake up your calling. Sometimes it takes being denied the easy way out to discover the strength of your spirit. Sometimes the people you thought would carry you through end up walking away, and it is in their absence that your independence rises. Pressure pushes you to create, it forces you to adapt, it commands you to evolve, and in that push, something divine begins to happen. It's in pressure that hidden gifts start to surface. You discover how to lead when there's no one else left to follow. You learn how to build when everything around you falls apart. You tap into creativity not because you want to, but because you must. You write, you speak, you pray, you push, not out of luxury, but out of necessity. And sometimes the best things that ever come out of your life are birthed not in joy, but in struggle. Pressure removes distractions. It makes you focus. It strips away the non-essential. It forces you to choose what matters. When you're pressed, you don't have the energy to waste on petty things. You don't chase empty applause. You don't live for approval. You don't pretend to be something you're not. Pressure makes you honest. It makes you real. It brings you face to face with your core, and that confrontation, while painful, is necessary, because until you meet yourself fully, you can't walk in your full purpose. There are people walking this earth who would never have started that business, never written that book, never spoken that truth, never answered that calling if not for the pressure that pushed them to it. They didn't find their path in peace. They found it when the walls closed in. They found it when the room was small and the stakes were high. They found it when they had to choose between quitting and becoming. Pressure has a voice, and though it may sound like anxiety, doubt, and fatigue, it is often a signal that something greater is on the horizon. It tells you that you're nearing the moment of breakthrough. It reminds you that growth is happening beneath the surface. That's why some of the most powerful people have been through some of the deepest pain. They've walked through fire and came out refined. They've carried burdens that others would crumble under. But they didn't crumble, they climbed. That doesn't mean pressure is easy. No one enjoys it while it's happening. There are moments when you feel like you can't take another step. Moments when everything inside of you screams to stop. But if you keep going, if you keep pressing forward even while the pressure rises, you will find that the fire didn't burn you. It forged you, it didn't break you, it revealed you. Purpose does not always come with applause. Sometimes it comes through agony. Sometimes the greatest call on your life is discovered in the middle of your most intense chaos. Sometimes the very thing that feels like it will destroy you ends up being the exact experience that defines you. And when you look back, you'll begin to see the pattern. You'll remember the nights you cried yourself to sleep, and you'll realize those were the nights you became stronger. You'll recall the pressure you thought would bury you, and you'll see that it birthed something beautiful instead. You'll understand that the pressure was not a punishment. It was a process. It was the soil in which your destiny began to grow. People may look at your success and celebrate what they see, but they'll never fully understand what it took to get there. They'll see the light, but not the weight. They'll see the fruit, but not the famine. They'll see the finished product, but not the pressing that produced it. And that's all right, because your story was never meant to be measured by public approval. It was meant to be lived with divine intention. So if you find yourself under pressure, don't panic, breathe, stand still if you must, but don't give up. You are not being crushed. You are being called. You are not being buried. You are being planted. And though it feels like the weight is too much to bear, remember that the pressure you feel today may be the very thing that delivers your purpose tomorrow. And when it does, when the moment finally comes that you rise from that place of struggle with clarity in your vision and conviction in your heart, you'll realize that every ounce of pressure had a purpose. Every tear, every test, every trial, it all worked together to push you into the very reason you were born. Purpose doesn't float down gently like a feather. It crashes into your life like a storm and demands your attention. It stirs in the dark, it calls through the chaos, and when you rise to answer it, the pressure becomes your power. There is a moment in every life where the wind goes quiet. The door's close, and the things you've always leaned on are no longer there to hold you up. In that moment, everything you thought defined you is stripped away, the titles you wore like armor fall off, the applause you grew accustomed to goes silent, the money runs thin, the people you once leaned on disappear. The strength you always counted on begins to falter, and you are left with nothing but you. It is in this space of nothing that truth begins to speak. You learn that you are not the clothes you wear or the house you live in. You are not the status on your nameplate or the followers on your screen. You are not the job you do or the car you drive. When all of that is taken away, and you're standing there with your pockets empty and your heart full of questions, you are finally in a position to meet your real self. When you have nothing, your soul has room to speak, the noise dies down, the distractions fade, all that's left is what cannot be taken away, all that's left is your essence, and that is where your identity begins to rise. Not the image you crafted, not the mask you wore to please others, not the performance you gave to feel worthy, but the core, the honest self, the you that exists even when no one is looking, even when nothing is working. You don't truly know yourself until you're in lack. When your resources are gone and your comfort is disrupted, when the well dries up and the doors lock shut, that is where your real character rises. Not when things are easy, but when they are empty. Not when your cup is full, but when you're drinking from the last drop and still choosing to believe. That's where faith begins its work. That's where it's no longer a song or a sermon or a scripture you quote to feel better. That's where it becomes your anchor. Faith is not a luxury that lives in your pockets. It doesn't depend on how full your bank account is or how smooth your path feels. Faith thrives in famine. It grows where nothing else will grow. It stands tall in dry places. It survives in the silence. And sometimes the only way to grow that kind of faith is to walk through seasons of nothing. Nothing teaches like hunger. Nothing humbles like lack. Nothing strips pride like going without. And yet, it is in this empty place that something sacred begins to rise. You discover the strength to stand even when you don't know what tomorrow will bring. You find yourself praying not because you want more, but because you need more of him. You cry not out of despair, but out of the deep hope that somehow there is meaning in the fire. When famine comes, it doesn't ask for your permission. It doesn't send a warning, it arrives suddenly, it takes, it removes, it silences. And if you let it, it will also teach. It will show you the idols you unknowingly built. It will expose where your trust was really placed. And it will leave you with a single burning question. Will you still believe? This is not the faith that dances when blessings fall. This is the faith that kneels when everything is gone and still says thank you. This is the faith that doesn't flinch in the dark, the faith that doesn't run when comfort leaves, the faith that holds on when answers don't come. That kind of faith is rare, and it is forged in fire. Fire changes things. It doesn't leave what it touches the same. It refines, it purifies, it removes what's unnecessary. When you walk through the fire of famine, you come out with less baggage and more clarity. You come out with fewer distractions and deeper conviction. The parts of you that depended on external affirmation start to die, and the parts of you that were planted in truth begin to thrive. We often want faith without fire, growth without grinding, victory without valleys, but it does not work like that. The greatest version of you is hidden in the very situation you're trying to avoid. The strength you need is buried in the struggle you're walking through. You are being built in the breaking. You are being defined in the drought. You are learning to see with eyes that no longer depend on what's in front of you, but on what has been promised to you. Faith is not only forged in fire, it is revealed in famine. It becomes visible when there is no reason to believe, and yet you still do. It becomes powerful when there's no plan, but you still trust the process. It becomes beautiful when you have every excuse to quit, and still you rise. When you have nothing, your vision becomes clearer. You begin to see the world not through the lens of gain, but through the lens of grace. You realize that breath itself is a gift, that waking up is a miracle, that the ability to feel, to hope, to love, to hold on, is a sign that something greater still lives inside of you. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are those who have walked through nothing and learned everything. They've gone without and gained wisdom. They've been rejected and discovered resilience. They've been emptied and filled with faith. They know what it is to live on the edge of uncertainty and still have peace. Because what they carry is not circumstantial, it is not seasonal, it is sacred, it was formed in a furnace, it was tested in a trial, and it is not easily shaken. You are not lost because you have nothing. You are being found. You are not forgotten in the fire. You are being formed. What feels like the end may be the beginning of the most authentic season of your life, the season where you stop pretending, the season where you stop performing, the season where you finally meet the you that was buried beneath the busyness and the burdens. So do not despise the famine, do not fear the fire, do not curse the nothing. It may feel like loss, but it is also liberation. It is cutting you loose from everything that can't hold your purpose. It is teaching you how to walk by faith and not by sight. It is showing you that what you have is not who you are. And what you lack does not determine what you carry. You are being refined, you are being revealed, and one day you'll look back on this season and know it wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to uncover you, to pull out of you the kind of faith that storms cannot shake, the kind of identity that loss cannot erase, the kind of strength that silence cannot suppress. When you have nothing, you have the chance to find everything that matters. And when you walk through the fire of famine and come out still standing, still believing, still loving, still hoping, you will know that faith was not a feeling. It was a foundation, and it was forged in you when all you had was the will to keep going. That is where you find who you are, not in your abundance, but in your emptiness, not in what you hold, but in what holds you when everything else is gone. There is something about scarcity that makes you stop and think. When you do not have more than enough, you begin to pay attention to what you do have. When your hands are not overflowing, your eyes become sharper, your movements more deliberate, your heart more aware. Scarcity is not just the absence of abundance. It is the beginning of wisdom. It is a classroom, and it teaches lessons that plenty never could. Scarcity slows you down. When everything is limited, you can no longer afford to live recklessly. You cannot throw time away. You cannot waste energy on things that drain you. You become more selective about what you engage with, more intentional about how you move. Scarcity does not just discipline your habits. It shapes your values. It makes you pay attention. There are things you never think about when everything is flowing freely. But when the flow begins to dry up, when the oil runs low, when the budget is tight, when the time is short, when the energy is thin, that is when you start asking questions that matter. Do I really need this? Can I stretch this? How do I make the most of what is left? And in those moments, you begin to see how much you have overlooked. You start to recognize that you were never really managing what was in your hand. You were assuming there would always be more money, more help, more time, more chances. But scarcity interrupts that illusion. Scarcity sits you down and makes you see the truth, that everything you have is a gift. And if it is a gift, it must be handled with care. People often think stewardship is about wealth, that only when you have more do you need to manage wisely, but that is not how stewardship begins. It begins when you have less. It begins when the refrigerator only has enough for 2 more meals, when the schedule has only 1 free hour left in it, when the strength in your body is low and your choices are few. That is where the foundation of stewardship is formed. In scarcity, scarcity sharpens your senses. It makes you grateful. It makes you thoughtful. You start to count what you used to ignore. You learn to repurpose. You learn to plan. You learn to pause. You do not just rush in. You evaluate. You ask yourself what is truly necessary and what is simply noise. You begin to see the difference between indulgence and investment. You stop wasting because you no longer have the luxury to. And what starts as necessity becomes discipline. What begins as survival becomes strategy. You realize that living with less taught you how to do more, that managing scarcity prepared you for abundance, that being careful with pennies trained you for when dollars came, that saying no in tight seasons gave you the wisdom to know what to say yes to later. The discipline that scarcity teaches does not leave you when the season changes. If you learn its lessons, you carry them with you. You remember what it was like to have only a little oil and yet find that it was enough. You remember how the loaves were few and yet the people were fed. You remember how the strength was limited, but the assignment was still completed. You carry that memory not as a wound, but as a witness that with careful hands and a focused heart, even a little can go a long way. Scarcity teaches you that you are not the amount you possess, that what you hold does not define who you are. It teaches you that increase begins not in your wallet, but in your mindset, that real abundance is not about how much flows in, but how well you handle what you already have. And sometimes the greatest mistake people make is assuming that more will solve everything, but more without maturity is waste, more without strategy is chaos, more without stewardship becomes a burden instead of a blessing. That is why scarcity is often the training ground. It teaches you how to stretch, how to preserve, how to sustain, how to plan, how to make something out of almost nothing. There are people who have created greatness out of scarcity, who built legacies from leftovers, who used what others threw away and turned it into something that blessed generations. They learned how to use scraps with skill, how to turn fragments into foundations. They were not handed much, but they handled it with such care and such creativity that it multiplied in their hands. Scarcity teaches you how to manage the moment, because sometimes you only get one. One conversation, one connection, one open door, one chance to make the impression that changes everything. If you've lived in scarcity, you learn how to recognize that moment. You do not take it for granted. You do not fumble it. You step into it prepared because you have been trained for it in tight places, and that training goes deeper than discipline. It touches your heart. Scarcity makes you more compassionate. When you know what it feels like to go without, you carry a deeper empathy for those still in that season. You do not forget the taste of hunger. You do not mock small beginnings. You do not look down on the person still in the struggle because you know what it took to survive it. You become more generous, more understanding, more grounded, because you know what it is to live on the edge, and you also know the sacredness of every small thing. You understand that nothing is too little to matter, that a little time, a little energy, a little support, a little grace can make a big difference. You learn that value is not measured by volume, it is measured by impact, and scarcity teaches you to maximize impact. Scarcity humbles, but it also empowers. It builds a kind of confidence that is not loud, but unshakable, the kind that comes from having walked through seasons with almost nothing and made it through, the kind that knows how to build again even if everything falls apart, the kind that does not panic when resources dip because it has learned how to rise without them. And that is what stewardship really is. It is the ability to make the most of what is in your hands, to see what others overlook, to value what others waste, to honor the little so that more can be trusted to you. Stewardship is not just about what you hold. It is about how you hold it. Scarcity trains your hands to hold with care, to release with intention, and to build with purpose. So if you are in a season of scarcity, do not despise it. Do not rush through it. Let it teach you, let it shape you, let it prepare you, because when more comes, and it will come, you will be ready. You will not squander it, you will not mismanage it, you will not treat it lightly. You will carry it with the wisdom and reverence that can only be learned in places where you once had to make do with less. Scarcity is not just a season, it is a teacher. It is a gift disguised as a challenge. And if you learn its lessons, you will emerge not just with more, but with the capacity to carry more well, That is the power of stewardship born from scarcity. It does not just change your condition. It changes you. There is a quiet pain in looking down at your hands and finding nothing there. No resources, no opportunities, no help. Just skin and bone, fingers that once built things now lying still, palms open and bare. It can feel like failure. It can feel like the end. The silence in that moment is deafening. The stillness feels like a verdict. You start to wonder if you've missed your chance, if your time has passed, if what you hoped for will never come to be. You ask yourself what can grow from nothing, but what you must understand is that empty hands are not lifeless hands. They are simply hands waiting to be used. Empty hands still carry a seed. A seed is not obvious. It is not loud. It does not draw attention to itself. It looks like a small thing. It may even seem worthless to someone who does not know what they are holding. But to the one who has vision, a seed is everything. It is a promise wrapped in a shell. It is a future hidden inside of now. It is greatness in its most humble form. And sometimes life strips your hands so that you will finally see the seed. Because as long as your hands are full of other things, you may never notice it. As long as you are clinging to what was, you will not have room for what could be. As long as you are reaching for validation or clinging to comfort, your fingers cannot grasp the thing that grows into your destiny. So life, in its strange wisdom, lets some things fall away, not to punish you, but to position you, not to rob you, but to reveal what has always been there. You see, the seed does not come in shiny packaging. It does not walk with applause. It does not shout. It whispers. It comes in small thoughts that won't leave you alone. It comes in dreams that visit you in the quiet. It comes in passions you cannot explain. In burdens you carry when no one else seems to care, in gifts that feel too small to matter, but they are not small, they are seeds, and seeds are powerful. A seed does not look like the tree it will become. It does not look like the fruit it will eventually bear. But within its shell is the code, the blueprint, the potential for something so much greater than its appearance suggests. The same is true for you. What is in you may not look like much to others. It may not be marketable yet. It may not be understood, but it is real, and if you will dare to plant it, something beautiful will grow. But planting requires faith. You must take the little you have and release it. You must trust that what you bury is not lost. You must be willing to go through a season where nothing seems to be happening, because seeds do not grow overnight. They break before they build. They go down before they come up. And in the darkness of the soil, something sacred is happening that eyes cannot see. That is why it is not a weakness to have empty hands. It is a beginning. It is a sacred space. It is a space where transformation can occur. When your hands are empty, your heart becomes available. When your resources are limited, your creativity expands. When your comfort is gone, your courage rises, and what was hidden begins to rise to the surface. It is in this place that you learn how to trust the process, to believe that you are not overlooked, to remember that you were not created to end in this empty space. The seed you carry is waiting on your willingness, waiting for you to stop comparing, to stop doubting, to stop waiting for perfect conditions and start planting with what you have. You do not need a stage to begin. You do not need a platform or a title. You do not need to be famous. You do not need approval from the world to begin nurturing what has been placed inside you. All you need is belief. All you need is the courage to use what is already in your hand, no matter how small it seems. All you need is to stop looking for more and start honoring what you have. Because the people who change the world are not the ones who had the most when they started. They are the ones who were faithful with the least. They were the ones who saw the value in the seed, the ones who kept planting even when nothing seemed to grow, the ones who watered in tears but kept showing up anyway, the ones who endured the dark and the cold and the silence and still kept believing that something would break through the surface. That is what empty hands can do when they are trusted to the one who sees what is inside the seed. Your seed may be a story that needs to be written. It may be a song that has yet to be sung. It may be a business idea that no one else understands yet. It may be the strength to raise your children with love and grace. It may be the voice to speak when others remain silent. It may be the heart to serve when no one claps, but whatever your seed is, it matters, and it is enough. You may feel like nothing is moving, like your prayers are hitting the ceiling, like your efforts are in vain. But seeds do their best work in hidden places. Growth begins underground, and just because you cannot see it does not mean it is not working. Just because you feel overlooked does not mean you are not growing. Just because your hands feel empty does not mean your life is. What you hold may not be visible, but that does not mean it is insignificant. The greatest miracles begin in obscurity. The greatest movements begin in silence. The greatest change begins with one small yes to what is already in your hand. So do not curse your emptiness. Do not despise your small beginning. Do not mourn what has left without recognizing what remains. If you have breath, you still have a seed. If you have vision, you still have a future. If you have faith, you have enough to start. The world does not need perfection. It needs your seed, your authentic gift, your unique voice, your quiet strength. The thing you thought was too small may be the very thing that feeds nations, but you will never know until you plant it. So stand tall even if your hands are empty. Speak life even if your voice is trembling. Sow with tears if you must, but sow, start, move, trust, because the seed you carry is not just for you. It is for those connected to your obedience. It is for those who will eat from the fruit that has not yet grown. It is for those who are waiting on what only you can bring. Empty hands are not empty at all. They are full of possibility, full of potential, full of promise. All that remains is for you to believe. Because even when your hands are empty, they still carry a seed. And so, after all has been said, I want you to take one more look at your hands, not with shame, not with discouragement, not with disappointment, but with revelation, because what looks like emptiness to the natural eye may, in truth, be the very space where your miracle begins. What if the space that feels empty is just waiting to be filled with vision? What if the very absence you are trying to avoid is the place where your assignment is born? What if the silence is where you finally hear your true calling? What if the discomfort is really divine construction, shaping you for something your comfort zone could never produce? You see, the world wants to tell you that value is measured by how much you have, but heaven speaks a different language. Heaven looks at intention. Heaven sees obedience. Heaven responds to faith. It is not the size of what you hold that moves mountains. It is the faith you hold while you carry it. And even if your hands feel light, even if they carry nothing visible, they are not void of purpose. They are filled with the power to begin again, to build. To stretch, to release, to plant, you do not need everything to do something. You just need to recognize the something already within you. Let this be the moment you stop waiting for more and start working with what you have. Let this be the hour you stop rehearsing what you lost and start nurturing what still remains. Let this be the day you speak to your future with conviction, even if your present feels uncertain, because the future is not built by people who have everything. It is built by people who make something out of the small they have been given. A seed doesn't need to look like a tree to carry the power of one. A beginning doesn't have to resemble the end to be destined for greatness. And your current condition doesn't cancel your calling. It might just be confirming it. So if you've been waiting for perfect conditions, let me lovingly tell you this. Plant anyway. If you've been afraid to start small, trust the power of small beginnings. If you've doubted whether your offering matters, let me remind you, no act of faith is ever wasted. It is not always about having more. Sometimes it's about seeing more clearly. Sometimes it's about trusting more deeply. Sometimes it's about lifting those empty hands toward heaven and saying, "Here I am, use me, shape me, grow me. Even if I don't see the fruit yet, I will be faithful with the seed. There is still time. You are not too late. The dream is not too far gone. The soil of your life may have been dry, but rain is coming. Harvest is coming, but it starts with planting. It starts with trust. It starts with believing that even empty hands still carry purpose. So go ahead and plant. Plant the idea, plant the love, plant the kindness, plant the courage, plant the faith, and then water it with perseverance, nurture it with prayer, protect it with boundaries, and wait with expectation, because one day soon what you planted in secret will rise in strength. What you carried in silence will bloom in beauty, and what you thought was empty all along was really the birthplace of your next breakthrough. The seed is in your hand, now is the time, plant it, and watch God do the rest.